free throughout. If you have any questions, just go ahead and type them in the chat. I'll see them, or we have our chat wrangler who's going to help as well. So to get started. All right, so taking Trout in the classroom virtual with myself and Tom right over here. He's here, don't worry. So first of all, some background information on Trout in the classroom, or TIC, because I noticed in the original poll when you all were signing up, a lot of people actually aren't even familiar with the Trout in the classroom program. So we really want to focus on kind of giving you enough background information so you know what we're talking about then. So first of all, what do you do for Trout in the classroom? The idea is you are going to be getting a batch of eggs from a hatchery right out in Hagerstown. That those eggs were originally from a hatchery all the way in Washington State. And you get them, you put them in your tank that you have set up, and you're raising them through all of their stages. So once they hatch, they're alvin. Then once they start to lose their egg sac, they become fry. Then they start to get little markings down the sides of them. Those are called par marks. So that's the par stage. And then eventually they get to be finger sized, which is that fingerling size. So typically eggs arrive in December, and then you're raising them up and releasing them sometime in April or May once they hit that fingerling size. The point then of raising these trout and releasing them is for recreational fishing. So that is why we're putting them there. But then the whole concept of, learning about trout in the classroom is all the extra stuff, especially when it comes to doing this program with your students or with the public, or however you're capable of doing it. So here at Irvine, being not a school, we don't necessarily have a classroom, so to speak. We do a lot of, outdoor, not informal environmental education. We do have a nature preschool here, and we also have a homeschool group that comes. And so we've been kind of incorporating our Trout in the classroom with them, but then also by doing some public programming. And then this year by going virtual and making an entire kind of program about these fish for just about anyone to view. So you have this connection to the outdoors, allowing kids to see, and it's just so cool watching these little tiny orange eggs hatch out, and these little helpless fish like flopping around on the ground. And then eventually they get huge, which at the end of the PowerPoint we'll walk over and I'll show you each of our stages of trout that we have. We have some big girls from the 2019 season that we just measured them at 15 and 16 inches. So they've gotten pretty big. So it's amazing watching kind of that process happen. There's of course all the different environmental education that you can do with it, your stream conservation, and then kind of all three of those combined is all the different STEAM connections that you can make. Pretty much water testing, measuring food, collecting all the data, different art projects to bring in the art in, fly tying. There's so many different things that you can hook up, not just, the environmental literacy standards, but you can also hook it up with your NGSS curriculum standards as well. So who all is involved in Trout in the classroom? It's kind of run by NGOs and government agencies support. Trout Unlimited and then other organizations are who kind of facilitates the program. It occurs in about 35 states throughout the United States, which is about 5,000 classrooms that either have trout or salmon in the classroom. For Trout Unlimited in particular, they are facilitating about 2,000 classrooms, which equals to about 80,000 students that are being reached through this program. In the state of Maryland, typically there are about 120 classrooms that participate in Trout in the classroom. This year, of course, was a little different because schools closed. And when you don't have students there, you don't have staff or teachers there. Sometimes even the custodians aren't there anymore to even just feed the fish. It was really difficult for teachers to have these fish tanks in their classroom. So right now there are 4, but there will be another one added, right? So yeah. Up to 5 currently active Trout in the classroom tanks inside of a organization or a school building right now. One of them, of course, being Irvine. So just the pictures there can show you kind of that egg stage up at the top. And then what's cool is our egg basket there that we keep the babies in. It's a grate. And so when the eggs hatch, the little alvin fall right down, makes it super easy for counting, keeping track of everyone. And then you can see the next stage is kind of that fry stage when they're losing their egg sac. And then our big girls down at the bottom there. And that picture was actually taken a couple months ago. So they're even bigger now. So what do you need to kind of even begin to, get involved in Trout in the classroom? You're going to need a tank. Typically, most schools have a 55-gallon tank. A chiller is super important and is your kind of biggest purchase, depending on if you buy your supplies or whether you have a really awesome volunteer who can get you supplies, or whether you apply for the different DNR grants to help get supplies as well. There's a bunch of different ways that money doesn't have to be a hindrance all the time. Your chiller is going to keep your tank at that nice cold temperature of somewhere between usually 55 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Our fish do best when it's cold. Then you have your filter of some sort, and we can show you then, we have a couple of different styles of filters. Your egg basket to start keeping your eggs and your alvins in. All of your water chemistry testing supplies, which you can see in that picture at the bottom, is showing the master test kit where we test pH and ammonia and nitrate and nitrite. And then also all your chemicals then that you're going to add to the water, such as your bacteria, water conditioner, if you have hard water, etc. Then you're going to need the food, which your Trout in the Classroom volunteer will provide you with, and it comes from the hatchery. You start out with teeny tiny little bits of food, smaller than a grain of rice, and you do calculations to figure out how much you should be feeding them. And then eventually they move up to bigger food. Once they get a little bit bigger, even when they're a little younger, there's a lovely auto feeder. So if you do go on spring break or, Christmas break, things like that, in, pre-COVID or hopefully this post-COVID life that we're getting back into, your fish are still getting fed, even if you're not physically there for a couple of days. Also, these fish are pretty hardy. They're not frail and fragile. If they go a day or two without eating, they're not going to just keel over and die. Then you have to have some sort of hood or lid because these guys like to jump. And so you're going to want to have that on top to keep them from just kind of jumping out and finding, fish on the floor. From experience, you don't want to find fish on the floor. Your kind of lid section, which we'll show you on our tanks, then also will be insulation around your tank, again, to help keep the water colder so that your chiller isn't pumping and working extra hard. Lights are either kind of optional. It's up to you whether you want lights on top of your tank. It depends on how much natural light you get in. Then with the natural light, you have to worry about algae growth and just kind of balancing all of that. We do have lights on ours, and ours are on timers, which makes it super easy. And we even have, which we'll go over, the Wise brand of outlets that allow us to kind of turn on or turn off the lights as we need them. Probes, we'll get into probes a little bit more. The probes were kind of a new thing that we tried out this year. We're still working on some glitches and everything with those, but we're super excited. And I'll let Tom talk about that then more when we get to that section. And then you'll be supplied with your DNR permit that says, yes, you're allowed to have these fish and take care of them during the season. So here is an example setup tank. This was our tank when we first put up our big, this is a 6-foot tank. So it's a 145-gallon tank, a lot of water. You can see the different sections here on the tank. You have the chiller that's sticking in down here, and then that's the coil. And then it loops down, and the chiller is actually down below the tank. Same thing with your filter. The filter is this box down here. You have your intake valve and then your outflow where the water pours back out. Your insulation, at this point, we hadn't had insulation all the way around the tank yet. It was just on the top as a lid. But when we show you our actual one, you can see all that insulation. And then also it's important to have an air stone so that we're getting enough oxygen into the water for the babies and the adults. And then also a temperature probe. So now this is just a standard temperature probe. You just stick it in, and then the little black box up in the left corner there is basically going to tell you what the temperature is. Our other probes then that we got into included temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, like all of the extra things, and are a lot more accurate than this little temperature probe. Your chiller will also have a temp gauge on it that will turn on when the tank needs to be cooled down, or vice versa. So then we get into, well, we had to go virtual. We had to figure out what to do because our 120 schools went down to 4 schools, and we really didn't want the kids to miss out on this awesome experience. So of course we went virtual mainly because of COVID. COVID made a lot of changes to everybody, to Irvine, to Trout in the Classroom, to schools. Just all organizations were affected by this and by following the different regulations that were set forth. So because so many schools shut down and they couldn't have physical tanks in their classroom, we wanted to figure out a way that kids could still be involved in the Trout in the Classroom program. They could still see the experience, not just from pictures or like looking it up on Google. We wanted them to still be in depth in this program. And so we did a whole bunch of things that let us go virtual, and it was crazy, the turnaround time. When did you first approach me and say, hey, let's get a camera on this tank?
Oh, somewhere in August.
August, yeah. And Tom was like, let's get a camera. Let's put this camera on this tank. And then it just exploded from there. It was crazy. We now have 2 cameras and the live streams and the Trout Thursday videos, which we'll talk about. We just started adding more and more, and it was really fun to watch this program evolve. It was great because here at Irvine, as soon as we shut down, we immediately switched into, well, we got to reach people somehow. And my coworker and I started off by doing Facebook Live videos literally every single day in the month of March and April, because at that point our trails weren't even quite fully open yet. And the building here actually is still not open. We still have that shut down. So we want to still get people involved and show people, what's going on. So Irvine, we started with Facebook Lives and then kind of expanded from there with pre-recorded videos on YouTube. And then doing, now that schools either went back virtually, went back hybrid, if we weren't to go to the schools, we were like, okay, well, how can we still get this information out to you? And so for our Nature in the Classroom programs, instead of going to the classes now, we either host a Zoom meeting or a Google Meets or whatever virtual platform the schools can do. And we still do our environmental education programming. So it was great that we were able to pivot really fast and had some background experience on technology a bit with Irvine doing that. There's still a big learning curve to figure out different things like editing videos and everything like that. Also, it was fun because we at Irvine had just started the Trout in the Classroom for the 2019 season. So we immediately even had to go virtual and did a Facebook Live when we did our first release last year in, what was it, April or May of 2020,
yeah, right.
When we went to Morgan Run and it was raining that day and we were out there with the camera and the Wi-Fi there was non-existent. So then we had to turn off the live streaming and then we pre-recorded it and then eventually got the second half of the release up on Facebook then. But we wanted people to still, see that these things still are happening and just share how fun it was. So going from even the first year of us being involved, having to kind of switch virtually towards the end, it made doing an all virtual Trout in the Classroom program this year that much easier. Still a lot of issues, which we will get to. The other great thing about being virtual is you can reach anyone, anywhere. We have an email address that people can then contact us and ask questions, and then we answer them in our videos. And we've had people from New Mexico, all different places that have been contacting us going, hey, that's really cool. I'm thinking about going virtual with ours ourselves. Like, can you give me some tidbits? And so it's great because we're just able to reach a lot more people and then also support those other Trout in the Classroom chapters to help reach their kids that they're not being able to reach right now. So touched on this a little bit, but how did we go virtual? First of all, lots of partnerships, lots of figuring things out where we were getting supplies. Our new 6-foot tank was actually a donation from Ecotone, which was great because we were then had a big tank to be able to keep some adult trout over so that the kids could see the different stages. And then we have our 55-gallon tank with our eggs and our alvins and our fingerlings. Then we got into the probe. So Tom, would you like to explain this
Sure.
probe adventure?
Okay, approximately 3 years ago, I was in one of the schools up in Harford County, and I saw they had this electronic thing sitting on top of their big tank that they had their fish in for their aquaculture. And I started checking in to see what it was, and I found out they had built a homemade system where they monitor pH, nitrate, ammonium, dissolved oxygen, the temperature, the flow, the light, the conductivity. And I said, oh, that is neat. I want to get one of those and build it. So it took me another 1.5 to 2 years to the point where that became a reality. And what really made it happen was that the Maryland DNR gave us a grant through Irvine for the probes. The probes themselves cost $1,000. And then the other part of it was about $450, which was made up of 3 raspberry units, Raspberry Pis. So right now, we actually have the system working, but the probes need to be calibrated. And that's taken a while to get that done. I'm waiting for a piece of equipment from one of the schools so that I can finish the calibration on those. And then what Jenna was talking about, the WISE cameras, I hit on that from another chapter in TU that said that they were using WISE cameras. So when I looked into it, they're cheap. You can get cameras for under $40. Actually, ones that pan and zoom. The only problem with the WISE cameras is they were not designed to work on a PC. So they have a set of firmware you can load on them. It's called real-time streaming protocol. And 2 of their cameras, you can load those on. And we actually have one of each of those here at Irvine. And what that does is it allows us to send a stream of pictures down to the website that Trout Unlimited National is supporting. And they are the host for anybody that wants to view them. So all the viewers do not hit the website here at Irvine. They're actually hitting a paid web service. It's pretty cheap. And then Sean here at the bottom, he's the one that's been doing our website and a lot of the updates. Mm-hmm. So that pretty much covers that.
Yeah. So again, just a lot of extra supplies that we kind of found along the way that made going virtual a little bit easier. But then of course, with new technology comes the fact that you have to figure out how that technology works as well. So it's great because Tom over here, he just likes to fiddle with things and he figures it out. It's great while I'm busy doing the rest of my job here at Irvine. So having a really good Trout in the Classroom volunteer is going to make your life so much easier. So again, as we said, we started with our one WISE camera that we'll show you then on our tank. That is a pan zoom camera. And then we integrated a second one that's just a stationary camera. And we've been moving them around onto the different tanks based on what stages of fish that we have. And then we also decided to put our data sheets that we have all of our water chemistry data online so that the students can actually see live data and work with actual real numbers. Instead of the teachers just making up numbers or making up a scenario, they can actually see what's happening in an actual tank with the fish and seeing how the nitrogen cycle flows throughout that tank. And then we got into our Trout Thursday videos, which are bi-weekly videos that come out on Thursdays. And each one is just a different lesson that you can either find out of a couple of different books or just activities that we've done here, Project Wet, Project Wild, all that kind of stuff that we then tailored specifically to our rainbow trout. And we'll get into that a little bit too. And then again, it was just a really quick turnaround time from Tom coming up and saying, let's put a camera on this, to kind of this big program that we're doing now, and now teaching a professional development lesson about it. So it's been a crazy ride. So with our Trout Thursday videos, some of it was prior knowledge or prior kind of just experiences working in all the different parks and everything that I've been in, having the resource to go out into our streams to film different things. Then Trout in the Classroom and Trout Unlimited has a pre-made like lesson booklet too, that even says, you know, here's the lessons that fit into the science curriculum. Here's for the history curriculum. Like it has all the different curriculums and then what activities fit under there. So it makes it really easy to make sure that you're still hitting those next generation science standards, all while doing environmental literacy standards as well. Again, as I mentioned, Project Wet, Aquatic Wild lessons, then gets into, okay, so you film yourself doing this, which is an art in of itself, figuring out how to hold a camera, whether you use a laptop, whether you use your phone, an actual video recorder, you know, all these different options. So you have this video where you're gonna look back at it, especially if it's you that's talking, and you go, oh gosh, that I look terrible. Like, am I talking about the right things? I don't know, but I have this thing, so I might as well not let it waste. I spent my time doing that. Well, guess what? Now that you have it, now you have to edit it and figure out how to make it look like it is slightly professional looking, which mine in no way are super professional. I found it's literally just a video editing app that's installed on most Dell computers. And I just clicked that and I went, sure, let's figure out how this works. And you can drag and drop different video clips in. You can shorten them. You can add music, which I haven't done yet. I'm not that special yet. You can add words, title slides, like all this kind of stuff. So you have to upload it to your computer, you edit it, and then you export it back onto your computer as a completed video. And then you have to upload it onto whatever format you're using, which in our case is YouTube. So then you re-upload it onto YouTube. And let me tell you, if your internet is terrible, like it is at my house, and even sometimes on days at Irvine, it's gonna take you probably at least 2 to 3 hours to do all of that. And that's after you've done the recording. Like the recording is its own thing, but just to get the video to a format where other people can view it, it takes a while. So then once it was uploaded onto YouTube, then it got sent to Sean, who would upload it to our website, so that it's really easy. Now all that the public has to do is go to our website, they scroll through the trout videos and they can pick which video to watch, and it takes right to our YouTube page. And there you go. There's the 30 to 45-minute video lesson of the week. And then again, as I said, it's great because these lessons, we wanted to make sure that, sure, we're explaining all the environmental literacy stuff, making sure that the kids understand why the trout are important, how they fit into the ecosystem, but also somehow looping it back to stuff that teachers have to get across to their kids with the curriculum. We understand that, especially now with COVID, if you're not hitting those standards, then it's not worth your time, which is unfortunate because there's so many environmental literacy standards and cool kind of environmental education stuff that's inherently important for people to know about. But if it doesn't hit certain standards, it's like, sorry, that's an extracurricular. So we really try to loop it back in with curriculum so that teachers find it useful. So then it's all about making sure that everybody's talking with each other, lots of emails, lots of phone calls, lots of texting, just to make all these different wheels and cogs kind of mesh together and work. So we have myself here at Irvine, along with my one intern, Adam, who's helping to take care of the fish. We have our Trout in the Classroom volunteers, being Tom and Jim, actually in the background as well. There he is. Then we have Chuck, who's the Maryland TU kind of head person, constantly communicating with them. Then our website contact at the aquarium with Sean to make sure everything that we're doing then gets up into the World Wide Web. And then also with DNR, which Chris is here as well, figuring out permitting and also the grants and how we're going to make all this happen. So you gotta know, you gotta be able to work with a lot of different people and figure out what kind of communication works best with each of those people.
Can I add to that a second?
Of course.
Yeah. If you go out and look at the Trout in the Classroom webpage, you'll find a section on there about the Trout in the Classroom, and it actually has all the links on there, especially the one for the DNR grants and permits, which for next year, July 1st is when they open up. Okay, this year is already closed. I'm sorry, July 15th. Thank you.
Okay, so because I saw looking at my chat over here, there was a question about like, what is the suggested time frame for everything? So your grant kind of stuff, July 15th. July 15th. So start looking at a DNR webpage has a whole bunch of information about the grants that you might be able to fill out. And then your MOI is going to be due usually September.
We like to have it as soon as possible,
Yeah.
but by September.
By September, basically saying, hey, I'm telling you that I want to do this program and that I have the materials and everything. And then starting kind of a little bit later in the fall, you're going to start to get your supplies together. And then you're going to want to get into starting to cycle your tank, usually at least 2 weeks before your eggs come. And your Trout in the Classroom volunteer will let you know when that egg delivery date is, which is absolutely never set in stone. Things always change with the egg delivery based on the hatchery in Washington, the hatchery in Hagerstown, whether it snows. So you'll be in communication with your volunteer to know when your eggs are coming. And then again, as I said, then you raise them up usually from December until a May release. I hope that answers that question. If not, let me know. So the whole thing of, you have this problem, well, we might as well learn from it, right? So just constantly learning, pivoting, changing things and making it work somehow. So some of our issues that we've had throughout this process, one, Irvine has a great firewall, and it was difficult to get the camera information through our firewall. We had to make sure that we weren't exceeding our bandwidth here so that the staff could actually, do their jobs on their computers and it wasn't just all fish. And so lots of issues with that. Thankfully, we have a good IT guy and our IT company that helps us. So we were able to figure that out. We're still working on the probe calibration again, figuring that out. Just Wi-Fi camera stuff. The one camera all of a sudden stopped working. Well, it's because the cord, it had fallen a couple times, which the Wise cameras are actually quite durable because the one has fallen over quite a few times from hoses being pulled, and it still works. But the little connection USB part, the wire had broken in there. Thankfully, you can buy those extra wires. Tom brought us over one, fixed it. It was great. With the videos themselves, with COVID, what do you do about your mask? So this is kind of a back and forth thing, and we do it both ways. So if you go through and you watch my Trout in the Classroom videos, a lot of them I am masked, and that's because I'm in a public area inside of a building with my other coworkers. Thankfully, Irvine was able to get most of us vaccinated, which has been great. So typically it's kind of like, well, kids are supposed to be getting used to seeing people with the mask, but then again, you lose some of that connection first over a camera and then even further through a mask through a camera. So making sure that you're speaking well enough, that you're trying to be animated with your eyes and your eyebrows and your hands. And thankfully I wiggle a lot, so it works well. With kids, it's easier to be really goofy than with adults, but at one point you're just like, whatever, I'm just gonna teach how I know works. And then with some videos, I was unmasked, and that was when I was, in a separate classroom. No one else was around me, that kind of thing. And whichever way we do it, we make sure that the people know this is why I have a mask, this is why I don't have a mask. And just trying to, normalize it because it still might be around for a while. Google Drive sharing. So emails do not like to send large files. And so you have to figure out Google Drive, and then you have to figure out whether the different people that you're communicating with have access to the Google Drive and how to share. And that's a whole thing. Snow. When it snows and Irvine's closed and I live 45 minutes away and I can't get in because there's just snow everywhere. So that's always fun trying to figure that out. Again, great to have your auto feeder at that point. And then the one picture here on the furthermost right is our alvins from our first batch, where we had a crazy alvin die off. I actually did a whole video about it. It's still slightly a mystery, but again, we used it as a teaching tool and, figured out, okay, what could all of the options be? And thankfully, we still have 18 wonderful, healthy fingerlings from that batch. So your successes, because you always have successes even after some failures. Our live camera feed for our tanks is working out great. We have amazing, again, Trout in the Classroom volunteers. I have great interns and volunteers that help me with the animal care here so that I can also focus on the fish. Pre-recorded videos are wonderful because you can edit them. Live stream is great, especially for kind of interacting in live time. But when you can film something and mess up saying something 8 times and it doesn't matter, it's a lot less stress in that aspect. And then again, these videos and live streams and everything, once it's on the internet, it's there forever. So you can access it anytime, anywhere from, all sorts of different student reach and people reach. And again, we had some great partnerships that came out of this as well. So we want to go virtual. How are we going to make that happen? And then I promise I'm going to look at my chat because I see that there's more questions. Okay, so first of all, decide on what platform that you want to use. It can be multiple platforms. It depends on what you're either familiar with, what you're comfortable with, what you can learn. Maybe you have to find someone that knows what they're doing on these different platforms and ask them. So ours are typically through YouTube is where we do our pre-recorded stuff. And then we do a lot of our live stuff, of course, via Zoom, Google Meets. You also have to figure out what's available to your school. Some school systems, you're not allowed to use Zoom. So you're going to be using Google Meets or all sorts of other plethora of virtual formats. And then social media. Social media can be a blessing and a curse. It really depends on, who is following you already on social media. Do you have to create a brand new social media account and that kind of thing? Thankfully, Irvine we already had a Facebook and an Instagram. And during COVID, we were in this aspect of we didn't really have a marketing person. So I also kind of absorbed some of that marketing responsibility too. So it was great because I could just post things on Facebook or an Instagram, kind of read the comments, get some feedback, and then tweak the post going from there. As I said, get comfortable with being goofy, being crazy. The more animated and excited that you are, the better it will come across via the screen. Because I know that the screen can be difficult, short-term memory, like we're just like, la, 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 especially with little kids. You have their attention for like 2 seconds and then they just start to wander. So then you got to act crazy to bring them back in. And you just got to do it enough that you figure out what works for you. Take your camera everywhere. Thankfully, most people, we always have a phone within a foot radius of us. So if you're doing something and you're like, oh, this is cool, just film it. The worst it does is it now takes up space on your phone. But that's why Google Photos is great. Google Drive, getting it off your phone. But anytime that you're somewhere and you can't get your kids there, film it, and then show them it. It's so much better for them to actually see it happening than for you to talk to them about it. Scheduling is also important. If you can figure out a day or a specific time that things come out, such as Trout Thursday, typically always comes out on Thursday. People are more likely to tune into something that they know is consistently happening, rather than, you know, one day you're doing a live stream at 8 a.m. and the next is at 2 p.m. and people are like, oh, I missed it because you're doing all these crazy schedules. Again, there will always be technical malfunctions. You gotta figure it out or change it up. If you can't troubleshoot it and you can't figure out what the problem is, well, now you gotta find a different solution to the problem. And then also just try to be as interactive as possible, which can be difficult on different platforms, especially with pre-recorded videos where you're not getting immediate feedback. There's not a chat function, there's not comments, there's not Zoom where you can like look at people. Like right now, the fact that I'm just staring at blank boxes, I'm kind of like, okay, I hope people are actually interested in this. Thankfully, we have the chat that I can see. But with kids, it's especially great if you can like see their faces and gauge how they're feeling, how they're interacting. Are they, you know, eating their cereal and playing with their cat? Or are they like, oh yeah, cool, and giving you thumbs up and things like that? Helps a lot. And then, as I said, originally, we actually set up a separate email that people can then email us, and then we can interact with those emails on our next pre-recorded videos as well. So even if you can't be in person interacting, figure out a way to still interact with people via this virtual format. And then you just do it. So many people are afraid of, what if it doesn't work? What if I don't know what I'm doing? You don't know until you try. So you just got to do it and then figure out what worked, what didn't work, and kind of move on from there, and just keep pushing through and don't give up. So just a quick thank you to all the people that we partnered with and that have helped us do all of this stuff. I'm going to stop my screen share so that I can look at these chats and start to answer questions. What we got? Okay, went over the time frame. Hopefully that worked. Yep, the Trout cam, we're good. Lots of good information. Wonderful. So what we're gonna do now is we're actually gonna go look at some fish. Woo! So I'm going to switch over to my phone so that I can show you all our fish. So be right back on my other camera. Hello. Ooh, let me turn that down so we don't have feedback. There we go. All right. Hello. So again, figuring out what technology is going to work for you. It's easier for me to show you things on my phone rather than it is to carry around my laptop. So we're going to use both and take a look at everyone. All right. So let me switch the camera around. All right. So here is our trout wall, essentially. So first up, right in our little egg basket, we have our Alvin that we got 20 days ago. 20 days ago. And they have all hatched out. We had about 120 eggs, and we have 113 Alvin that are happy and healthy and doing really well. A couple of them, you can still see their egg sac on the bottom of them, and then the other ones are starting to absorb it. They're in their fry and swim up stage, meaning that now that their egg sac is absorbed, they're ready to eat. And so little tiny pinches of food for them. Then we have our next set of girls right here, who they are 90 days old. And these are our fingerlings. So just a little bit of background, which you guys can
Always, if you want more information, check out the Trout Thursday videos. I go over a lot of this in there. All the trout in the classroom are triploid, which means they have 3 chromosomes instead of 2, and they're all female. And what happens is with those triploid fish, they're sterile. So when we release these girls, sorry, they're all girls. When we release them into the streams, they're not going to be interbreeding or taking over our native brook trout population, which is really good. So we have these girls here, and a little bit on the setup here. Things change all the time. Our installation here is on backwards because we then added the light switch. We added the cameras. Tom is just great at coming up with all sorts of funky, like jerry-rigged things in order to get the cameras where we need them to be, which is wonderful. And so we have our little camera here that's focused on the side of our albin, and then we have our top view of them. Eventually, once these girls get released out into this tank, we're actually, don't worry, these girls are going to a new home, because otherwise, if you put little fish with big fish, you only have big fish left. They will eat them. But eventually we'll be moving the cameras around to focus on this whole tank and then our bigger tank as well. So looking in, since this water is a little clearer than our other tank, you can see the chiller coil. So then that loops down around back. And then this is our big chiller box. What temperature it is. The other little probe right there is what tells the chiller whether it needs to turn on or off. Then we have our filters. We actually have 2 filters right now set up in both of our tanks because we're pre-cycling. Thankfully, these girls are big enough that we didn't need a net over here. But when we release these girls out, we'll have to add a net in. And then the outtake, again, the flow comes right out. This is great because it makes kind of that ripple that they would get in their natural habitat. So it provides them with even more oxygen along with the air stone that's down there to provide oxygen. Another neat thing that Tom and Jim added is this egg basket that is actually like a leaf pack for macroinvertebrates. And we even had a stonefly hatch out of it a couple of days ago. She was just kind of sitting up here. So that was pretty cool. So, you know, making a whole lesson about the macros and how they fit into the food chain with your trout, and with trout being an indicator species, with your different macroinvertebrates being indicator species. There's so many different lessons that you can do with this. And setting this up so easy. You can even set up just a 10-gallon tank as kind of a macro tank. You go out to a stream and you pick up a bunch of leaves, and that's about it. And then you have it in the water. Of course, doing macro searches with your students is also tons of fun. That is a potential activity that you could slowly start to do as regulations kind of ease up and you're able to get your kids out doing hands-on stuff again. So then we move on to our big tank, which is a little bit cloudy right now. It's actually better than it has been. But the reason it's so cloudy is because we have 2 ginormous fish in here. Hey, girl. Hello. So these 2 girls, again, the one was 15 inches and the other is 16 inches. We just measured them the other day. And if you look carefully, you can see, oh, come back. You can and then a little thing that says, you know, if you catch this fish, please contact this information so that we can know where the fish kind of move to up and down the stream, who caught it, how big it was, to kind of keep track of that. So these girls are going to be released either this week or next week. And that will then allow us to do a full, nice clean out on this. Only rinsing your filter stuff. You never want to really scrub your filter or use any sort of soap or other chemicals on your filter, because that has all your good bacteria in it. So we'll just rinse it out, refill it up, add in our extra bacteria, and kind of get it cycling so that then we can move our fingerlings. We'll have about 4 that we're keeping, and we'll move them over here and kind of start the cycle of growing them up into our monster fish again. As you can see that I talked about in the video, with these girls, we actually have clear hoods so that the light shines through. And then all around the tank, except for the front, we have our insulation. Again, that's keeping the tank colder so that the chiller doesn't have to work extra. Here's our little food timer, which is wonderful. You can set it for as many different times for it to go off as you need. And then around the side here, you can adjust how much food comes out at one time. And then another cool thing that Tom designed is this, that doesn't look like much. This is actually a drip pan though. So in case, and when I say in case, I mean, it happened to me multiple times. So it's probably gonna happen to you. I wish it not on anyone, but if your tank leaks, if you accidentally overfill your tank, I don't know who would do that, but if you overfill your tank, this is gonna catch the water and it's gonna drain it into a bucket. So here, it comes right out here and it drips down. Right now our bucket has stuff in it, but it drips right down into the 5-gallon bucket. And that's going to save you from having too much water go onto the floor. And it's gonna allow you that extra bit of time to be like, uh-oh, we have a leak, we gotta fix it. Or sometimes just from the tanks being so cold, sometimes it gets condensation between the glass and the foam. And so that condensation can kind of drip down, and then that will also just go out and into the bucket instead of getting into the wood or whatever counter that you have on it as well. Am I missing anything?
No.
So let me go to the chat real quick again to see. Love it. Really appreciate hearing everything. Love macros. Yes, love macros myself. They're amazing. Really fun. So thank you guys so much. I really hope that you learned stuff. Let me flip us back around. Yes.
Okay, Oregon Ridge, if you will send me an email, I will contact you and come by and we can talk about Trout in the classroom, give you, let you know what's going on. And then you can also, we'll get you invited up here to Irvine and you can see the setup in, action.
Totally. So if anybody is in the area or wants to, travel, maybe a road trip, anything like that, and you want to see our setup, talk to us more about it, please reach out to our emails, which are just put in the chat, and we'll get something set up, because it's not, the idea of this was to share it and to share it with everyone and have this available for everyone to use and then everybody to expand off of. And we just would love to hear about any successes that you've had using other virtual programming, even if it's not fish, whatever type of virtual programming that you use, and things like that. This person says, there used to be programs to raise shad. Are there any programs around that have other type of species, aquatic species? Mm-hmm. Sunfish and students. So there's a sunfish program that you can raise sunfish. Isn't there also somewhere, I guess DNR doesn't do it, but isn't there a tilapia? I know that some people raise tilapia in the classroom.
That happens in the aquatics when they do aquaculture.
Yeah.
Some of the schools, Carroll County, the high schools are doing it, and Blair High School and North Hartford, they all have the tilapia there, plus a variety of other fish. I'm sorry, what?
Green Street Academy. Yeah. Yeah, so there's definitely other schools doing different things out there. Going through, I grew up in Carroll County, I still live in Carroll County, going through the Carroll County public school system. I know that we did aquaponic, kind of hydroponic kind of stuff. We were just starting to get into it when I graduated. But sounds like that program has expanded a lot more. I see also that we dropped in the chat about the Sunfish and Students program. Also, the lovely thing is that you don't have to always limit yourself to, to fish or anything like that. When you talk about aquatic species, do your macroinvertebrates, or you can even do like perpikes. So go out, collect some frog eggs. DNR does have a list of the different species of reptiles and amphibians, how many you can have, whether you're allowed to have them with or without a permit, whether you're allowed to then the time frame for re-releasing them back into the environment, all that kind of stuff, issues about diseases, things like that. They have all that listed. So don't limit yourself just to fish. Me being a herp girl, I love going out, collecting eggs, watching them go through their metamorphosis, and then releasing them back where I found them. So that's always an option as well. Awesome. I think that was, I was getting, yes. So my other comment there is from one of our homeschool teachers that I actually just talked with for here. We're going to start to do some programming with the homeschool to get even more people involved. And the great thing is that once you kind of get involved with the fish, or with any sort of environmental education, even just regular school-based curriculum, if you as the teacher are passionate about it, you can really easily get your students to be super passionate about it. And then if they're passionate, they go and they talk to their parents, and then they force their parents to do things. It's great. When we do taking care of the earth programs and we talk about recycling, literally when we go back into the schools, the parents are like, what did you say to them? Because they yell at me if I don't recycle things. I'm like, good, yes, let's do it. So it's great to see retention from students as well, either virtually or in a live classroom setting. Awesome. So thank you guys so much. I hope this was what you wanted. And if not, and if you have more questions, don't hesitate to contact myself or Tom through our email addresses, and we will be sure to answer you back, and potentially even include your question in a Trout Thursday video.